name's Cory Doctorow, and I'm a science fiction novelist. I write books like this one, Little Brother, from HarperCollins here in the UK, and published by Tor in New York in the US, and in lots of other countries around the world by other publishers. I co-edit a website called Boing Boing. It's a very widely read weblog that's about kind of technology, culture, society, and I also was the former Director of European Affairs at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is a civil liberties group that works to uphold traditional liberties values in policy and law as it pertains to technology. So I worked at the UN and at the Commission and in various quasi-governmental bodies and standards bodies like the Digital Video Broadcasters Forum. So the last novel I published was this one, Little Brother. And it's a young adult novel, book for young people, and it's about kids in San Francisco who are kind of technologically savvy, use computers to play and to stay in touch with one another and to kind of live their lives, who are out playing a computer game, an alternate reality game. It's kind of a scavenger hunt on the day that a bomb goes off in San Francisco, blowing up the Bay Bridge. And the police find them, and because the war on terror is often a war against the inexplicable, you know, what are you doing here? Why can't you explain what you're doing in a way that makes sense to me? They end up getting taken away as suspects and actually treated very badly. And one of their number never comes out again, and when that happens they decide that they need to declare war on the Department of Homeland Security to win back the civil liberties that their country was founded on. And the rest of the book is part novel and part how-to for describing techniques that you can use to seize the means of information, to use technology to assert the liberties that are yours by right. And I think that the reason that it was successful, it offered a kind of three-point program for using technology as a young person. The first one was seizing control of your technology so that it obeyed you, because I think that ultimately technology is either your servant or your master, and if it's your master, then you end up living in the kind of Orwellian dystopia that people used to really worry about when they worried about technology, that Frankenstein future as opposed to the iRobot future. But it also talks about two other things. The first is a literacy of probability, statistics, and risk, which I think is something that's very lacking in the way that we think about security. So human beings' innate judgment about risk is not very good, and to understand why that's so, or to understand that that is so, just look at the lottery in your own country. I mean, statistically, buying a lottery ticket doesn't really affect your chances of winning in any meaningful way. And yet we sell a lot of lottery tickets to people who fundamentally don't understand probability. And this plays up when we start talking about risk containment, when we start talking about protecting children from predators, the majority of whom are people they know, but the majority of our effort goes against strangers. It plays up when we start talking about society from terrorists, who really account for a lot fewer deaths and economic harm than a lot more mundane things like breathing bad air or eating bad food or being hit by a car or civil unrest, all of those things that can actually really harm you. And then finally, it talks about civic engagement as the most important means by which your statistical numeracy or your statistical literacy and your control of technology can be used to make lasting change in society. That unless you get involved in civil politics, no one will take you seriously and nothing you do will last. And I think that that message speaks to kids and to adults, and it really brought both of them together in a way that they could all get behind. I kind of fell into the work that I do. I went to a very, very good publicly funded secondary school in Toronto. I'm Canadian, called SEED School. It had been founded in the 60s. The acronym is Self-Exploration, Education, and Discovery. Very, very 1960s, very Summerhill. The students were really encouraged to think very broadly about what they were interested in, and I really pursued a very, very wide range of subjects. And for me, this was really the key. It really suited me to be able to be very Catholic in the way that I approach my education, and to study just a really wide variety of subjects, and more importantly, to learn how to learn how to go out and find out more about a subject that interested me. I mean, in these days of Google, I think it would be a much easier thing to do, but in those days it was very challenging. I spent a lot of time at the library. I actually worked in libraries for a lot of that time as well, because one led to the other. And by the time I graduated, I actually didn't want to leave. I spent 7 years in secondary school. At the time, the norm was 5. And I went into an undergraduate program, and I found that I was in a program that really was a lot more, I guess, infantilizing than my secondary school had been, where there was a lot more control over what you could do. And I dropped out. I dropped out of 4 undergraduate programs, never got a degree, and ended up instead going to work in technology right at the time that CD-ROM publishing started. And that led into web publishing, and that led to being a systems administrator, to being a chief information officer for a variety of media companies, to starting a software company, moving to California to open our California offices in the middle of the dot-com boom, and going from there to work for a civil liberties group that worked on this stuff as well. And that was kind of the marriage of all my interests. And from there to moving to Europe, and all the while writing. And I guess the lesson for me is that the most important thing that I learned was how to be an independent learner, and that the actual specific facts were way less important than the approach. It actually ties a little into Little Brother. When I was a kid, I read this great subversive literature, as a lot of kids did. A lot of kind of smart kids go out and seek out subversive literature. Books like Steal This Book and The Anarchist Cookbook. It's full of all this forbidden knowledge. You know, today you get watered-down versions in books like The Dangerous Book for Boys, and there's a girls' version too. That is just kind of all the weird and crazy things about the world you never suspected, including a lot of dodgy things. And Little Brother was meant to be a bit of an update to that. But for me, I thought that listing a bunch of forbidden knowledge was a lot less useful than describing the existence of a bunch of forbidden knowledge that you could then at your leisure go look up with Google. That in the era of Google, it's not important to know stuff. It's important to know that stuff exists. If you have the keywords, you can gain the knowledge. And so really, I guess the thing that I would pursue if I wanted to grow up and have an interesting, self-defined, dynamic life would be pursuing those paths that put me in contact with a lot of different keywords I could later feed into a search engine.